few more people jumping in. Okay, that's the majority of you all who have your audio on. So, hi everyone. Thank you all for jumping on today's call. As you know, I am Morgan Colvin, the student programs coordinator for IABA. And just to go over our housekeeping rules. So we would like to encourage that you have your cameras on so that we can see your beautiful faces this evening. We also would like to remind you to have your microphones off. If you have any questions, please, you can raise your hand. It's an emoji that you can use to raise your hand, or you can drop your question in the chat. And then lastly, so emails have went out as you all are here. So please remember that you have access to the session attendance form, where to register, and how to find the recordings through that email. Okay. And always, if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to me at my email that I've been emailing you all since February. So you definitely should have my contact information. If you don't, just shoot me a message here. And I don't want to take up too much time for our speakers, as they're going to be talking about interviewing skills, which I know we all can benefit from, from just learning some more.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I do want to go ahead and turn it over to our speakers today so they can introduce themselves. And like I said, I can stop talking and let them take over.
Okay. Well, thank you, Morgan, for the introduction. My name is Stephen Thomas. I am an actuary at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas. We operate in 5 states under the company name Healthcare Service Corporation. And I've been an actuary, or I've been in the health insurance field for over 17 years. I'm currently a fellow of the Society of Actuaries, and I'm an executive director at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas. So that's a little bit about myself, and I'll turn over to Tony to introduce herself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. Good evening, everyone, students and professionals. My name is Tony Pearson, and I am one of the senior recruiters here at HCSC Blue Cross Blue Shield. I actually sit in the Chicago office, and I know Stephen sits in the Texas office, but I've been with the organization since 2017, initially starting out as a contractor and then moving over into a full-time role in 2021. I have about 15 years of experience in the talent acquisition space. I'm hailing from various industries, including the nonprofit sector, financial services, as well as insurance and healthcare. I am a graduate of both DePaul University with an MBA, as well as Roosevelt University with a Master of Science in HR Management. I think for me, one of the greatest parts of being a recruiter is that I'm constantly bringing people together. My hiring managers come to me with a specific opening in search of the most qualified candidate, and I hit the pavement running. So being able to work hand in hand with and connect those two, that's pretty rewarding for me, especially when you can find the perfect person for the position. And it does change their lives, not only for their career paths, but for many other reasons. So as you can see, a new job for someone can mean much more than just a new job. It could also mean money. It could mean cultural changes. It could also mean industry shifts, and or it could be the result of an extended layoff. So whatever the means that you are listening in today, we would like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to tune in to this interviewing skills session. So in order to get started, I'd like to bring up the next slide, which has a couple of scenarios.
Where do I see myself in 5 years? Good question. To quote the renowned scholar 50 Cent, I plan to get rich or die trying.
What would you say your greatest achievement is?
I began my last job joining a failing team, and so was commended on my leadership in turning that around. The only thing was I was 8 and the other competitors were 10 or 11, So to come third was a real achievement, particularly as I'd never even seen a conker before. The next year, still, to be recognised at an industry awards gala was a surprise, but a nice surprise. Apparently, it had been in there for 5 years. My granny keeps it in a jar on top of her mantelpiece.
Can I inquire about your last role? Why did you leave?
Why? What have you heard? Of course. And I'll be completely honest with you. I didn't feel the job was a good fit for my aspirations. And I wanted to focus on finding a position that I could really make my own. And I believe that this is that role. What part of no comment don't you understand?
What would you say your biggest weakness is?
Delegation. I like things done right, and so I often end up taking on too much by myself.
I know how that feels. What would you say your biggest weakness is?
Delegation. I like things done right, so I often end up taking too much on myself.
Thank you, Morgan. So as you can see, those were two varying scenarios with two individuals applying for a job. So if you could open up the chat for me, Morgan, or if people want to come off mute and tell me what your thoughts or what you discovered during those two scenarios. And if you're on mute, I think you may need to ask to be unmuted, or you can type your comment in the chat section that Morgan will be monitoring.
Yes, yes. So make sure you all drop something in the chat. Priscilla said tone, confidence, body language.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Body language.
Yeah. Lydia said the same thing, body language.
Absolutely.
Ophelia said dressing.
Dressing.
Lack. Emmanuel said lack of respect. Yes, yes.
Preparedness. Yes, I love that. So those are all very key when you all are going out into the business world. I see someone said one was more relaxed and the other one was just hyper. So in today's job market, we know that employers are seeking the most highly qualified individual to fill a limited number of openings. So you have to put your best foot forward because the competition is going to be very fierce. And sometimes simply just being qualified might not be sufficient to land that job. You also have to have the ability to effectively communicate your skills, your abilities, and your experience in a confluent and confident manner. So I'm going to turn it back over to Stephen so that he can pose some of the questions, what you think an interviewer is looking for when you're being interviewed. Stephen, take it away.
Yep. Yeah, so what do you think an interview is looking for when you're being interviewed? Anyone can jump in. What do you think is going through the head of the person who's interviewing you?
You can take yourself off mute if you have an answer. You can type it in the chat. Either one, guys.
I'll go ahead and chime in. I think they're looking for how you might fit with the team or the area that you're going to go into to see if you're the right fit. Because just knowing that you know how to do everything that the job requires is part of the role, but seeing how you fit with the team is also important. So how you answer those questions, how it looks, they already know who's already in the roles that you'll be working with. So they just kind of want to see how you're going to go together with that team.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. It's not just about you in a silo. You're going to have to work with other people. So they want to see how things would fit together. Yeah, that's a good point.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts?
What it counts for how your abilities fit in their work culture and how your thought process and what you are bringing to the table, how everything fits in their work culture, their vision for their company, and all of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Every workplace has a culture, and they need to make sure that what you're looking for or what you're able to bring to the table are consistent with the culture of the company. Otherwise, you're not going to be happy and you're not going to produce your best work. So I think how you fit in the work culture is important as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one more thing too. The job interview is really typically the first time that you have direct contact with the employer. So your words and your actions, once they are delivered, cannot be recalled. And if you recall in the scenarios, one guy quoted something from 50 cents, which was totally improper. And there is no tomorrow, there is no going back. Either you're going to successfully convince the employer that you have the required qualifications they're seeking, or you won't. Go ahead, Stephen.
Right. And on this slide, I've categorized a few, two different categories in terms of the things that interviewers look for. And some of the things y'all mentioned fall into these categories. But this is just trying to cover as broad a spectrum as I could think of for entry-level candidates. I'm sure there's other things that should be included as well, but just to get you thinking what I was thinking along those lines. So the first thing I think employers look for is attitude, and this is consistent with a lot of what y'all were saying. First off, they want to make sure that the person they're interviewing is interested in the job. And so how you convey how interested you are really has an impact in whether they'll want to hire you. Because if they feel like you're not really interested, you're just looking for a job, they're going to think that you're not going to stay long term, or it's going to be it's not going to last very long. Another thing they look for is curiosity. And so it's important to ask questions. And I think the reason they look for curiosity is because what we want to make sure is that the person who's coming in, especially if they're new to the industry and are doing an entry-level position, is that they need to be able to learn and to learn quickly. And if you look at someone who asks a lot of questions, they're going to end up learning a lot quicker than someone who doesn't. Someone who just keeps themselves, doesn't ask questions, doesn't seem curious at all, they're not going to get as much information as someone who's always asking questions and who's curious. So that's definitely something that is looked at. Humility, I think, is also important. If you're trying to get someone to develop and grow quickly, they need to be humble, because if they're not humble, then they'll think they know it all, and then that'll kind of stunt their ability to develop as well. And then this was mentioned before, will you have a good relationship with the team? Because most jobs require some level of teamwork. And so even if you're an individual contributor, you have to work with the team. And so it's important to ensure that whoever's being interviewed has good interpersonal skills and is able to work well with others. And then the other main category I think that's important that interviewers look for is aptitude. So if you don't have the attitude piece, then you're not going to be able to be incorporated in the company and enjoy your work and do well. But you also need aptitude as well. Not every job is for everyone, so it's important for the interviewer to find out whether you're suited for the job that you're applying for. And so specifically in our context, have you passed actuarial exams? I think especially at an insurance company, they want to make sure that you're progressing with your exams. So having an example of where you've passed an exam, that really helps to provide confidence to the interviewer that you can be successful with exams. What skills have you acquired? So you'll definitely need technical skills in certain roles, and it's important to make sure as an interviewer that the person has the skills that they put on their resume. And so they'll ask you questions to ensure that you really understood how you use these various skills or platforms, and ensure that you just didn't put it on there without truly understanding what you were using. And how have you demonstrated your abilities and skills in the past? So having good, solid examples is really helpful. Being able to tell a story is really helpful, because then they can share that with whoever they have to convince that you are the right person for the job. So it's important to have those stories when you're going through an interview, because it helps to solidify their confidence in you. And then finally, how well do you communicate? Because regardless of what you're able to do, if you can't communicate it well, then that limits its effectiveness. And so even in professions where you may not need to communicate as much as other professions, there's always some level of communication that's required. And so they'll get that from the interview. And so the main theme that we wanted to cover during this presentation is this concept of achieving the right balance. Basically, you don't want to be too extreme one way or the other. And this is true with everything in life. The most successful people are people who are able to achieve a balance no matter what you're working on or what your environment is. And so what we wanted to do during this presentation is focus on 4 specific topics related to achieving the right balance. So the first one is being interviewed versus interviewing the employer. I think a lot of times entry-level candidates are just focused on the being interviewed part and don't think of it from the perspective of interviewing the employer. So we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about being prepared versus sounding rehearsed. You definitely want to prepare. You definitely want to make sure you've done your legwork. But then you also don't want to sound like you're just spouting off memorized lines, because then it doesn't seem authentic, because they want your authentic self during these interviews. The third thing we're going to go over is providing enough information versus too much information. You want to pick and choose the information that you provide, and you want to make sure that you provide enough so that they can be confident to hire you. But then you want to limit things as well. You don't need to share everything if it's not pertinent, or if it, or if it even puts you in a bad light that's not necessarily representative of what you can really bring to the table. You want to be careful with that. And then the fourth thing is promoting yourself versus arrogance. Obviously, with an interview, the purpose is to promote yourself as much as possible, but you don't want to come off as arrogant. So we're going to cover these 4 topics and dive into them into a little bit more detail. So now we have another question, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. How many questions should you ask the interviewer? So if you're being interviewed, what do you think is the ideal number of questions to ask? Is it none? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4 or more? Go and throw out your opinions. You can either go off mute or put it in the chat.
Yeah, they're in the chat. Some said 4 or more. One said 3, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 4 or more, 1 or none. Someone said, and it depends on time left in the conversation. And then we have Emmanuel, who is also raising his hand. You want to give us your answer, Emmanuel?
Yes. So I think I would suggest 2, because during the interview you have been timed, and you cannot ask more questions because other people are also on the lobby that will be interviewed. So 2 is enough. Just make sure you summarize or you merge the number of questions you want to ask. You merge them in the 2, so you can save time for other people and also for your interview. So I think 2 is enough. Okay.
Yeah, there's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. I think when Tony and I were discussing this, I think the rule of thumb might be 2. in general. But you could potentially ask more questions depending on the timing. I know, and I know someone mentioned it depends on the time of the interview, or how much time there is left. I personally, and I think most interviewers do this, make it a point to, at the end, to give an opportunity for the candidate to ask any questions, just to make sure that they have that opportunity. But if I'm interviewing someone and they don't have any questions when I ask them if they have any questions, I do view that as a negative. And I mentioned earlier some of the reasons for that, because it almost seems like they're not really interested, or it could be a sign that when they do start working, they're not going to ask questions. And I think that stunts learning. So when it comes to the concept of being interviewed versus interviewing the employer, I think one of the points that I want to make is a lot of times when we come in as entry-level candidates, we kind of come in with the perspective that we really need the company to do us a favor. We need the company to give us the job. We don't view it as the company's getting something from us. And part of that's you're coming into something new. You may not have a lot of experience, so you feel like they have to, they're kind of giving something to you. But you kind of have to think about it from their perspective as well. They really want, as an interviewer, I really want a good candidate. And we're always looking for that. And we want to try to sell ourselves as a company to the candidate to make sure that that they'll choose us if they have various options. So I think it's important to understand that you're not just being interviewed, you're interviewing the employer. And that also helps with what we talked about earlier in terms of asking questions, because if you're interviewing the employer and asking pertinent questions, the employer is going to look at that and think, this is a very bright person. This is someone who can ask intelligent questions. And so I think it's important to think from that perspective, because having that right mindset is going to lead to more confidence when you're in these interview settings, versus if you're just thinking the company's doing you a favor, you're not going to have as much confidence. And it's going to cause you to maybe not present yourself as well as you could.
Absolutely. Stephen, also just with that, having the right mindset, just having a basic understanding of who you are, what experiences and achievements set you apart from other candidates. You have to keep in mind that there are several other people that are interviewing for the same role. So what makes you stand out as an applicant, and what do you hope to accomplish during the interview? Stephen mentioned earlier that the interview should be a mutual exchange of information. So not only are you being interviewed, but you are interviewing the company as well too, to make sure that it's going to be a good fit.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that, Tony. The next thing is asking questions. It demonstrates interest and curiosity. And I covered that a little bit earlier as well. And it's important to exhibit both of those traits. And then asking reactive questions also demonstrates aptitude and understanding. What I mean by reactive questions is if I, as the interviewer, say something to you, and you ask something about something that I said, then that shows me that you're able to think on the spot and respond intelligently to something that I've said. So that's a little bit better, I think, than just having like prepared questions that you thought of ahead of time that you just memorized and ask those canned questions. I think if you ask a question about something that occurs during the interview, that just shows that you're able to think on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'll turn it over to Tony to cover the upcoming slides.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about achieving the right balance and being prepared versus sounding rehearsed, what do you think would help you the most in preparing for an interview? And you can type some things in the chat. And Morgan, if you could shout them out, 'cause I can't see the chat.
Gotcha. Manuel, you can answer the question if you like, and also people can
Okay.
drop in the chat too. Go ahead, Emmanuel.
Okay. I think it increased your level of confidence when you prepare in advance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Nandisha said doing some research about the company. I believe Doris said doing, research about the company culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And more than likely, you're going to be nervous during the interview. So
Right.
2 words that you should remember when you're being prepared versus sounding rehearsed. One is preparation, and the second one is practice. So with preparation, the more you know about yourself, the more comfortable you're likely to be when you are responding to questions that the interviewer may pose. I just saw somebody, I think, type in something about researching the company, but what are the desired qualifications and responsibilities of the role? A lot of candidates just apply for roles because they want to get into a particular company, but their knowledge, skills, and abilities don't align with the job requisition. So make sure you understand what it is that you're applying for and research the company to determine what the philosophies are, what the products are, what the competition is, how big is the organization, what's the structure and the culture of the organization as well too. Employers and recruiters always look for someone who is genuinely interested in the position, not just the company. So the first point A, writing out and memorizing responses to commonly asked interview questions. And I always call that the STAR message. You should have at least 4 or 5 scenarios or situations to explain the question or the answer to the question. And that response should follow the method called STAR, STAR. The first one is situation. Just briefly describe the circumstance of whatever your experience was, be it your college association, your job, any athletic event, and what was the task? Describe the event or the task that you had to handle. Was it a difficult coworker, being president, organizing event? And then action, succinctly talk about what skills and steps you took to complete that task. And then just what were the results? In a few words, kind of state the results of what happened. We fundraised over $500,000, or we won the volleyball game by 25 points. So give some numbers in there as well too. B, having a friend conduct a mock interview for you and promote or provide that feedback from the mock interview. The third one could be filming yourself, answering common interview questions, and watching the video to see where you may need to evaluate yourself and enhance some of your skills. And then I see other on here as well too. Practicing in front of a mirror, making sure you're providing eye contact. So some sample interview questions could be, give me a specific time when you were able to persuade someone to see things your way. How would you answer that question utilizing the STAR method? Or tell me about a time when you were able to successfully communicate with another person, even when the individual may not have personally liked you. Stephen mentioned earlier that there will be times, multiple times, where you will need to work in a team environment, and everyone is not going to always get along. And if you are the lead on the project manager on the team, how are you going to utilize your influence to persuade the team to move in a particular direction. Or another one, a good one that most interviewers always ask, tell me about yourself. Now, use caution with that because it's not asking you to cite your demographics, your marital status, or anything about your age. Stick to what you bring to the table. Are you motivated? Are you intelligent? Are you organized? Always refrain or revert back that question to what it is you can bring to the position. What has been your greatest challenge? That's another question that's always asked. And it's not to see what your weakness is, it's to see how you overcome those challenges. Because we all face challenges in our positions every day. But if you say, well, I don't have any challenges or I don't have any weaknesses, that's a red flag for me because that means you're perfect. And there's no one that's perfect coming through the doors. Always have some goals set for yourself. That's another question that interviewers will ask as well too. What goals do you have? Where do you see yourself in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? So those are some common questions to ask during the interview for achieving the right balance. And I know you guys for the next slide talked about the resume components. And if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide. These are some things to not put on your resume. It shouldn't be centered. It should be always aligned to the left, or it could be fully aligned on left and right. The qualifications that the individual has on this resume are way too lengthy. If you think about recruiters look through hundreds of resumes per day, and they're looking for keywords and phrases. Please refrain from a dissertation on your resume or anything too lengthy. If it's visually difficult to read, that's a good way for your resume to go right into the trash. Or if it doesn't have any format at all, and the sections are not clearly defined. Make sure you're highlighting. I always say bullets are good, utilized in a resume. And with your email address, make sure that it's something professional. I've seen resumes come through that have really risque email addresses. And to me, that is not showing yourself in a professional light. And also clean up your social media. Most employers will look through your Facebook pages, your LinkedIn pages. So make sure that you're promoting a good representation of who you are if you want to work for a particular company. And then the next slide, did we have any questions on that one? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So the next slide in achieving the right balance, this is a customer service role. This resume is very visually pleasing. It's extremely well organized. It uses chronological order. Her skills or his skills are very clear and concise. They have used 3 to 4 bullet points per job, and the sections are clearly defined. And when you're talking about the chronological order, make sure if there are gaps in your employment to identify what those gaps are, because you may sell yourself out of a job if you don't specify what those employment gaps are. So it could be you were studying for your master's program for 2 years, so indicate that on the resume because we are looking for longevity, we are looking for sustainability, and we are looking for consistency. And moving to the next slide on achieving the right balance, being prepared versus sounding rehearsed. We mentioned this earlier. Research the profession, research the company, and especially research the role. I've reached out to candidates who didn't know they applied for the role. So when I tell them I'm calling you back for the investment analyst 2 position, then they'll ask me, so can you send me the job description? Well, that's an automatic disqualification for me because you've already applied for the role. So you should be well prepared to know what you're talking about or what I'm calling you about. And determine how you would respond to common interview questions. Be mentally prepared to respond to some of the uncommon interview questions. So you may be asked, what's your favorite color? And I don't think it's necessarily your favorite color. It's just how you respond and your passion for your favorite color or your loyalty to your favorite color. My favorite color is green, and I have I drive a green car, or my patio is green. So they want to see the passion with an uncommon question. And then practice, practice, practice. I think someone said earlier that you should ask as many questions as you want. The rule of thumb is around 2 to 3 questions to ask an interviewer, because you don't want to seem bombastic in the interview or overbearing in the interview. You want to just show them that you have just enough information about the company to let them know that you have been curious about what they do, what they stand for, what values they hold, and what they represent, and how you would be a good fit into that culture as well too. And then when you're responding to interview questions, try to keep it simple and sweet and succinct. Sometimes candidates tend to ramble, which could, to me, tell me that they're overbearing and that they don't take the time to listen, and that they're too busy trying to be impressive, that they're not really understanding the level of detail that I need in a particular role. Questions on that? Perfect. So we can move on to the next slide for achieving the right balance. And this is what to wear or not wear. I know that we've moved over into a business casual environment, but I think it also goes back to researching the company. If you are going to work for an Amazon or a Google or a career builder, they do have a more casual environment. So you can dress up casually appropriately. You don't have to wear a suit and tie. However, if you're interviewing for possibly an architectural firm or possibly a financial services firm, the attire could be a little bit more business attire, and I would err on the side of caution and wear a suit and tie. But again, speak the right body language too. Make eye contact, give a firm handshake, have really, really good posture, speak clearly, and dress for success. With females, be mindful of the length of your skirt or your dress, and also be mindful of if you have a V-neck or if it's a button up, make sure that you're not being too risque or too flirty, I'll use that word, with your attire, because the interviewer is also sizing you up just based off of that as well too. Any questions?
If you have any questions, you can. Oh, Ophelia, do you have a question you want to take yourself off mute? Or you can drop it in the chat. Either one works.
So my question is, hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, so about the length of the dress, is it appropriate to like put on stockings or
To wear stockings?
Yeah.
It depends. So wherever the region that you live in, stockings, it's probably hot. So I know in Chicago today, it's about 90 degrees. If you don't wear stockings, I usually wear stockings if I am going on a professional interview. And then you can kind of detect the culture of the organization once you get there. But to me, erring on the side of caution is always favorable. Then once you get into the position, of course, you can not wear stockings. But I would definitely wear stockings just to show a level of professionalism, to let people know that you have really thought about your attire and your appearance, and you are the person for the position.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And it is important to prepare for, impress during, and follow after the interview process. So before the interview process, just do your homework. Again, research the department, the role, and don't forget to use LinkedIn to look up some of the people that you might be interviewing with. Review your experiences and skill sets and make sure they align with the roles and the responsibilities for the job. Update your profile on LinkedIn. I've looked at people and they have not updated their LinkedIn since 2018, but yet they say they're currently working, but it's not shown in their LinkedIn. And create a list of questions to ask the interviewer. During your interview, make a good first impression. So that means dressing for the work environment. And when in doubt, to your point, dress more professionally. This is a key one for me. Arrive at least 15 minutes early, but no earlier than around 20 minutes. When you get to the security kiosk, I know our building gets relatively busy, so you don't know how long it's going to take you to be processed through security. So give yourself ample time, even to just go into the ladies' room or to the men's room to freshen up, especially if it's a hot, humid day. You don't want to go into the front of the interviewer, sweltering hot. So just give you time a chance to kind of mellow out and recuperate from the heat. Handshake, demonstrate self-confidence, but don't crush the handshake, crush the interviewer's hand. Also, please bring several copies of your resume because the interviewer will ask you, do you have copies of your resume? And yes, we have copies. We just want to make sure that you're prepared. That's a trick question, I guess you could say. And then also during the interview, engage in the conversation. Again, it's a mutual exchange of ideas and information. Be specific about your experiences. Be brief and to the point. Don't ramble. Just keep your responses short, sweet, and simple. Again, apply the STAR method. Describe the situation, your task, the action you took, and conclude it with the result. Ask questions about the job, and you can determine if the job is even a good fit for you. And also inquire about the next steps in the interview process, and you will follow up with them. So be sure to at least get a business card, a phone number, an email so that you can send them a thank you note. And that's what comes after the interview. Always send a thank you just to everyone that you interviewed with. Email format is fine. And just kind of reiterate your strengths and why you feel you are the best person for the position. It's all about selling yourself. And Stephen mentioned about, are you being arrogant? This is the opportunity for you to stand on your soapbox and to let people know that I am the best person for this position. So it's okay. Perfect. And then Stephen, I think you're moving on to the next slide.
Yeah, is this, I think you're going to cover this one in this, but I can cover it if you want me to.
Okay, no problem. So this is also providing enough, and I think I kind of covered this in my dissertation as well too, versus too much information. The interviewer needs to be able to provide support for recommending you. So I have a case right now where a candidate, she harasses me pretty much every hour. So I don't think she would be a good fit for the role because I understand who my hiring managers are, and that will be a little bit overbearing for them. Provide a story about yourself, not too broad, not too detailed, but just the right amount of information to let them know that you are the best person for the role, highlighting your knowledge, your skills, your abilities, and your experience. Be honest, but highlight the positive. Don't backlash or badmouth your former employer. If there was something that was negative, try to kind of switch that around to say, it just wasn't a good fit for me. There was no growth for me in the role, but never badmouth a former employer. And then I believe the last one is promoting yourself versus arrogance. And you're taking this one, right, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm doing this one.
Perfect.
Yeah, so the question is, what words can you use to emphasize your skills on your resume to increase the likelihood of getting an interview? I guess the general question is, what are some words that you can use to emphasize your skills?
Mhm.
So feel free to jump in or put in the chat or come off mute.
Okay, if I can.
I hear someone.
Yeah, was someone speaking?
Yeah, I will say some of the keywords in the position, I mean, the job descriptions, that's, I think, what you would like to use to have, probably
Okay.
being picked for an interview.
So read the job description and try to be responsive to that in the words that you use. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Any other thoughts?
Morgan, do we have anyone typing in the chat?
Yep, we sure do. So Greg said proficient.
Ah,
Nandisha said executed. Priscilla said beginner, question mark, proficient, question mark, expert.
exactly. I like the word proficient because it's proficient, technical proficiency or proficient fundraising, large sums of money. I love that word. I think somebody said beginner. It depends on what level of role that you're assuming. I wouldn't say beginner because most employers want you to have some kind of experience coming into the role. But I love you've energized or you've executed. That was a good word too. Intermediate. Now, if the job description is calling for intermediate level of knowledge, then yes, you can certainly highlight that word.
Right. Yeah, these are actually a list of resume power words to represent certain skills. So the first column is if you want to represent yourself as a team player, these are some of the words that you could potentially use. Then the next column's leadership. There's one about responsibility, the third column, and then the last one is about communication. So you could potentially use these words within your resume to emphasize these various skills. So it's kind of, yeah.
We had Emmanuel, he raised his hand as well. So did you just want to answer Stephen's question, Emmanuel?
Yes, I wanted to mention accomplishment, but I can see it under the responsible for. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, I can see accomplished. Like I wanted to say accomplishments. You know, if let's suppose a student wants to apply to Amazon as a software engineer, and on his resume he said he developed maybe an Android app. He just listed it. Okay, so let's say the interviewer is like, okay, you just listed it, but we don't see anything that can show as a proof. So what have you accomplished? So maybe he has the link that the manager can like click on the link and go and see his accomplishments or his portfolio's website or anything relating to his accomplishments. So accomplishment is something or one thing that can attract a manager to like interview you, like your skill. Yeah. So through your accomplishment, the interviewer is able to know your skill, and that will make you unique among the applicants. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. If you're able to list specific accomplishments, that kind of sets you apart. I think even the use of the word accomplish indicates that you didn't just view it as a task that you were completing, but there was more to it. You took some sort of pride in what you did and pride in your work. So I think it definitely makes sense to utilize that word and also to provide specific accomplishments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very quickly, someone, and I think this is a very important question because it was a question I had when I was first applying to jobs. Is there a special reason why all the power words are in past tense? Do you know why?
So I'll take that one. So in your current role, they should be present tense, but in all of your previous roles, they should be past tense. Because
Right.
if you're still working, you're currently leading, you're currently managing, you're currently directing, you're currently developing, you're currently accomplishing. So in your previous or in your current role, they should be present tense.
Yeah, and I think just another point with that, I think putting in the past tense emphasizes that you were able to be successful at doing it, versus even at like the present tense, or especially the future tense, that's not indicating that you've done it, that you've accomplished it, that you've demonstrated it. So I think that's probably a way to just emphasize that aspect of it. Any other questions or comments about this grid?
We do have a hand raised.
Okay.
James, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Okay, thank you, Morgan. Yeah, this is just a follow-up on the power words being in past tense. I want to find out, so is it possible that probably on my resume, I will overly use adjectives? For instance, I efficiently supervised. Would it sound overly emphasized or overly described? I don't know if my point is clear.
I think I understand. Well, you definitely don't want to use the same adjectives over and over again, or the same adjective over and over again, because then that shows like a lack of creativity, or that maybe it's just, it may cause the interviewer or the reviewer to think that you're just trying to emphasize one word that you know, or something along those lines. But I think you want to use a diverse amount of words, yeah, and I think beware of being repetitive, because I think that makes it harder to read as well.
Absolutely. And you can utilize a thesaurus to find some other words that collaborate with the word that you're trying to describe for your experience.
And did we answer your question? I want to make sure that we understood it correctly.
Yeah, I did. I was asking because I run my resume through these apps, and actually I use different adjectives for like every skill, but I realized that almost all of the adjectives were highlighted that I need to revise it, and I was a bit confused as to whether that was the right way to go. That's why I wanted to confirm. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think as long as you keep as long as you don't become repetitive, I think
right.
I think it should be good.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, this slide, I wanted to continue talking about promoting yourself versus arrogance, and just cover a few points related to that. So I think it is important to promote yourself, to highlight yourself, but you do want to be careful as well, because, well, if you put something on your resume, when you come to the interview part of it, you need to be able to defend whatever you put on your resume, or provide some substance for what you put on your resume, because the interviewer will most likely ask you for specific examples about the things you put on your resume, or ask you to talk about it in more detail. So it's important to put things on your resume that you're able to support. And if you find that maybe you're not able to support it, what you want to make sure is like create opportunities for that. So like, just to give a simple example, if you put Excel as something you're proficient in, but you can't think of a project where you were able to use Excel and use it to accomplish something, then maybe look for opportunities to utilize Excel, even if it's something in your personal life, or something where you create the situation yourself where you can utilize it, because then at least you have an example to support what you put on your on your resume. And then even if you're able to, like, let's say you don't have the skills, but you're able to kind of defend yourself during the interview. If you really don't have those skills, it could put you in a difficult spot when you start the job, because then the interviewer expects a certain level of proficiency. And if you don't have that, you're not going to get the attention that you need, the development that you need. And it'll just end up being a bad situation for everyone involved. You'll probably be able to adapt to that, but you don't want to put yourself in a compromising situation. So it is important to promote yourself as much as possible, but you don't want to pass a certain point where you're not really able to support how you promoted yourself on either your resume or during the interview. And if you're going to claim to be proficient, you really need to be proficient, or at least be able to provide examples. And then, because interviewers interview a lot of people, and they're able to pick up on when someone isn't really proficient when they say that they're proficient. So that's why you need to prepare, so that you can really reflect the type of proficiency that you have. You don't want them to have the opposite thought, where you actually are proficient and you just didn't represent yourself well. But yeah, so it's important to have that proficiency, or be able to support that proficiency.
Absolutely.
And then I think it's also just as important, especially for entry-level positions, to portray yourself as teachable. It is just as important as portraying yourself as skilled, because no one expects entry-level people to know everything, and they expect them to have to learn on the job in a short amount of time. And the better you are at learning, the better you are at being taught, the faster you'll progress. And so I think a lot of times people think they need to focus on skills, but I think also it's just as important to focus on portraying how you've developed yourself, or worked with others, or allowed yourself to be taught. I think that's just as important when it comes to entry-level positions. But that was pretty much everything that we wanted to cover. These were the four main things that we discussed during this presentation. But we can open it up now for any questions or any comments about anything we covered. I know we covered a lot of information, but if there are any questions or comments at this time, feel free to jump in.
Yes, and I know that we're also running out of time as well, but definitely, if you have any questions, I remember I'm also going to be including their contact information. So Stephen and Tony, I think I have both of you on LinkedIn, so I'll connect with your LinkedIn and include it in this, but definitely, if you have any questions after this, there will be a way to reach out as well. Michael, you can go ahead and ask your question. Yes.
I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, so last year, December, I was looking for a job. I was job hunting, and I really prepared for interviews. I came to realize that in Ghana, no matter how you prepare for interviews, it all boils down to salary. You can prepare and be competent as much as you want. Once the next guy quotes a lower fee than what you want to take, the job is going to the next person. So that's my personal experience, and I just wanted to share. I'm sure if everybody on this call had to share his own experience, they will have similar experience compared to mine. And also, there was a time I went for an interview and they asked me to talk about myself. So I think the interviewers were around 40 and 50 and 60. So they asked me to talk about myself, and I used the STAR approach. So I was talking about my strengths, my skills, my achievements. So one of the interviewer said, hold it right there. We want to know about you, not your achievements. So we want to know where you are from. What's your middle name? Like, where do you stay? We want you to get personal, not your achievement, your whatever. No. So yeah, it was very frustrating during job hunting. So I think that was my personal experience. I just wanted to share. Thank you.
Yeah, there might be cultural differences. I know definitely in America, I think they avoid getting that personal. I think Tony can probably attest to that, just because there are legal reasons not to do that. But it could be different depending on the country that a person is in.
Yeah, those questions are illegal to ask, and it could raise a case for discrimination. So you don't want to get too personal. That's once you get on the job, you will have team building exercises to kind of know you get to know you as a person, and then you can get to know the team as a person in a more social setting. But the interview is to assess your skill set and to see if you're qualified for the job.
Right.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much for your question, Michael, or not question, but just insight, what you've been through, your experiences and everything, because I believe that would be helpful for not just the people on the call, but the people that are watching. They're going to be watching this recording later. So I appreciate that. Yes, so as we are coming to an end and wrapping things up, I did want to go ahead and give you all the information that you need in order to fill out that Google form. So the animal of the day is octopus, in spirit of The Little Mermaid coming out this weekend. So definitely go see it if you haven't. It was